Star Trek Academy Collision Course, Chapter 25. "You're sure you want to do this?" Sam asked. Kirk tapped his fingers on the passenger console of the rental car, and Sam knew his brother was thinking through the problem. There was another thing about him. You could actually see Jimmy stop and think things through, most of the time at least. "It's not like I have a choice," Kirk finally said. "There's no way I can get anywhere near the academy again, and I really need to get access to the maintenance computer logs at the Sloan complex." He gave a tired smile. "If this guy you know is as good as you say he is, then okay, I want to do this." Sam peered through the rental car's windshield at the night rain, then checked the time. It was the 10:15 shower, scheduled to end at 10:30. The windshield's repulsor field wasn't properly aligned, and a few raindrops hit the transparent aluminum, smearing the streetlights into streaks of hazy rainbow colors. "Okay," Sam said, "but just so you know, this guy, he's not just into computers." "I don't need to know that, Sam." "Yeah, you do." Kirk gave him a glance. "Is some kind of crook?" "He's not from Earth." Sam knew that was all he had to say by way of explanation. It was widely accepted that Earth didn't produce hardcore criminals these days. But there were a lot of other planets in this galaxy, and not all of them were as perfect as the homeworld of humanity. "Then he's going to want something." "He'd go for your override in a minute." Kirk sighed. "That guy from Starfleet said they hadn't found the staff car. You didn't ditch it, did you?" The last was a statement, not a question. Sam couldn't meet his brother's eyes, looked out at the rain. "I needed the money." "Sam, I told you I can get a full-time job in one of those shops in New Union Square." "Not that kind of money." Kirk put his hand on his brother's arm. "What kind of trouble are you in?" "Old trouble, Jimmy. Nothing new. Just some old debts to pay back." "And you're in debt to this guy, this criminal?" Sam nodded unhappily. "Say I give him an override. Would that cover what you owe him?" Sam had never felt so conflicted. He'd made so many bad choices that he couldn't see a way out this time. The last decent option left to him was to keep his kid brother from following in his footsteps. "Jimmy, you can't do that." "Sure I can. Look, Starfleet already has my override. For sure, they'll take it apart, see how I did it, add a new layer of security to their low-level stuff, and then it'll be useless. So if I give the specs to your friend, there's no harm done. He gets something he thinks is valuable, and I get to find out the name of the person who's causing all this trouble for Alyssa. I don't have a problem with that." The rain stopped. Sam checked the readout on the controls. 10:30, sharp. "Okay," he said, hands tight on the controls. "Just as long as you know what you're getting into." Kirk's forehead creased. "Is there something else I should know?" "Nah." Sam switched the car into ground mode. "It'll just be a simple trade." Kirk settled back in his seat, and Sam loved his brother for being the one person in the world who trusted him, and hated himself for not telling him that was exactly what he shouldn't do. Sam drove toward the docks. Kirk whistled in appreciation as his brother drove the car through the holographic screen and into the cargo deck of the Pacific Rome. "Very nice." "Try not to look around too much," Sam cautioned him. "They're a pretty jumpy lot." Kirk saw 5 guards approach the car with laser rifles leveled. "Got you." Then Kirk sat forward. "Sam, they're kids." There were a few hundred colonists at the storehouse by the time 14-year-old Jimmy Kirk reached it. Dusk had given way to night, and the unfamiliar stars of Tarsus IV shone through the cold air, forming constellations he didn't know. "Is this where Governor Kodos is?" Jimmy shivered violently. All he had was his light jacket. Matthew and the boys with him had heavier parkas and gloves to keep their hands from freezing as they gripped their laser rifles. "Somewhere," Matthew said. He was looking around, past the clusters and knots of colonists, men, women, families with children. A line of sorts was forming by a refueling station. Jimmy saw floodlights there, tables set up with computer terminals. The adults who seemed to be in charge wore red bandanas like Matthews and the other boys. They were scanning colonists' hands and eyes, handing out colored cards. For rationing, Jimmy thought, though he didn't see any food. "We need to go over there," Matthew said. Jimmy looked where his friend pointed, toward a smaller table set up under a single floodlight by the loading dock of one of the storehouses. There were 2 older boys and a girl working at it. Jimmy recognized one of the boys, Griffin. He was 19, so he was allowed to operate flyers and usually drove the visiting kids around on leisure days. His parents had one of the big farms in the valley. They even had horses. Jimmy had ridden one of them. "Here he is," Matthew said as they approached the table. Griffin looked at Jimmy as if he were one of the horses, as if he were being inspected. "Jimmy Kirk, right?" he asked Matthew. "Yes, sir." Matthew and the other boys hung their rifles on their shoulders and stood in a line like soldiers at attention. Griffin tapped the computer terminal on the table. You've got a good file, Kirk. Prime qualities. It's what the Gov likes to see. You're on the list." "What does that mean?" Jimmy asked, puzzled. "It means you're going to be okay," Matthew said quickly. "Food, parka, everything you need." "That's great." Jimmy's teeth chattered as he spoke. He didn't want to appear ungrateful, but why wouldn't he be getting everything he needed? Everyone knew food was going to be tight for the next few weeks, but the fungus hadn't ruined any parkas as far as he knew. Griffin held out a red bandana. "Are you on board?" Jimmy stared at him without understanding. Griffin scowled at him, impatient. "Matt, explain it to the kid." "You just gotta help out, okay?" Matthew dropped his voice almost to a whisper. "There's not as much food as everyone thought. The fungus got into even the processed stuff. So things are going to get tense, you know? The governor needs help to keep everyone under control." Kirk looked around at the other kids with their rifles. "How do we do that?" "We protect the food we do have. Do what the governor says. Round up any troublemakers, that sort of thing. Sort of like protection." Jimmy nodded to Matthew. That all made sense. "Okay, sure, I'm on board." Griffin threw the bandana at him, and Matthew caught it. "He's going to need a coat, too." Griffin said something to the girl, and she hopped up onto the loading dock and went into the storehouse. Matthew helped Kirk put the bandana around his neck like the other boys. Kirk's fingers were shaking too much to tie the knot. Kirk thanked his friend, and then asked the most important question he could think of. "How about coats and stuff for the kids in my cabin?" Matthew shook his head. "The governor checked their files. Nobody's prime. You're the only one." "Who will take care of them if I don't?" "Don't worry, someone will. Maybe us. Maybe one of the other teams. The way the governor's working it, everyone's going to be taken care of. You just have to do what you're told now." Matthew leaned closer. "And don't ask so many questions, okay? If Griffin doesn't like you, he can take you off the list." Just then the girl came out of the storehouse with a parka and gloves and even boots for him to put on. Almost immediately, Jimmy felt warmer and guilty. He hoped the kids from his cabin would get theirs soon. Then Griffin came to him with a laser rifle. "You know how to use this?" "Of course," Jimmy said. All the kids visiting Tarsus 4 had been given lessons in essential farm skills to protect livestock from predators. Not that there was any livestock left in the colony. When the fungus had struck the animal feed stores, the ostriches and trans cattle had all been slaughtered. But it was already too late. The fungus had already entered the livestock systems and made the meat toxic. Griffin shoved the rifle into his hands. "Good, then here's your first ration." He gave Jimmy a concentrate bar, too, and laughed when Jimmy shoved nearly the entire bar into his mouth at once. "There'll be more when your team's finished their next assignment." Jimmy chewed vigorously and swallowed hard as Matthew stood to attention like a soldier again. "What are your orders, sir?" Griffin grinned. He obviously liked the way Matthew behaved toward him. "Get back to the kids' cabin. Take care of the others there. Should be 23 left." Jimmy felt proud. His team was going to take care of the kids in his cabin right away. "All of them?" Matthew asked, frowning. Griffin's grin vanished. "Do you have a problem with that?" "No, sir." Griffin touched Matthew on his shoulder. "That's what I like to hear." He looked over at Jimmy. "Just be sure your friend here does his part, understand?" "Yes, sir." Jimmy felt certain there was something else going on that Matthew and Griffin hadn't told him about. Why would anyone think he wouldn't want to help the other kids in his cabin? "Ready to go back?" Matthew asked. "Yeah, but..." All heads turned toward the main tables as a shriek interrupted Kirk's question about picking up supplies first. A young mother with a toddler in her arms was screaming something at two teenagers in red bandanas. The teenagers were trying to pull the child from her, and she was fighting back. Jimmy's eyes widened. Why weren't the other adults there stopping them? Then he saw the reason. Other teenagers in red bandanas had rifles aimed at them, preventing anyone from coming forward. Suddenly, the young mother broke away and began running madly across the lot between the storehouses. Jimmy could see her path would take her right past Griffin's table. "Take her down, Matthew." The coolly delivered instruction didn't register for Jimmy, not even when he saw his friend toggle his rifle off safety mode, heard the power cell ramp up. The woman was fleeing for her life, her child's legs kicking out. Soon she came close enough for Jimmy to see the tears glistening on her face. Each breath escaped her in a cloud of vapor. All she cried out was, "No, no, no!" Then a red beam of energy stitched the darkness between the muzzle of Matthew's rifle and her head. She hit the ground with all her forward momentum, crumpling into a ball and rolling once as the child flew from her arms, wailing. Another teenager raced up to the woman's body, fired another beam into her, then almost casually shot the toddler too. Jimmy was too shocked to cry out. He could barely catch his breath. His friend Matthew was expressionless as he lowered his rifle, but he smiled when Griffin tapped his shoulder with a bar of food. "Good shot," Griffin said. He passed out bars to the rest of Matthew's team, held out a last one for Jimmy. "Any questions?" he asked. Jimmy was 14, scared to death and surrounded by lasers. He took the food. He asked no questions. Chapter 26. Come out, wherever you are." Kirk knew that voice. He gulped down a deep breath to steady himself. "Sam, who are these people?" But even before the doors to their rental car were jerked open, Kirk knew the speaker's identity. His throat tightened. Sam got out of the car, silent. The moment Kirk stepped out his side, he was shoved against the vehicle with a rifle muzzle under his chin. "Jimmy!" The word came out in a burst of laughter, and Kirk twisted his head to see the person who could not be here, but was. 3 years older, but easily recognizable. Matthew Call from Tarsus 4. "I heard you got away, but there were so many stories going around, so many lies about Kodos and the teams. How are you doing, pal?" Matthew pushed aside the rifle that pinned Kirk to the car, but 3 other rifles still kept Kirk in their sights. "Not going to say hello to your best friend? The guy who kept you alive on T4? Kirk fought down the desire to tell Matthew what he really felt. "You also tried to kill me. Only after you blew your chance. Your choice, your fault. Want to do something about it now?" Kirk knew if he took a step forward, he'd be cut down. He focused on his mission. He had promised to help Alyssa, and that's why he was here. So he only had one question. "Yeah," he said with a rueful smile. "I really did blow it, didn't I?" His former friends stared at him, awaiting more. Kirk obliged him. "You guys were right, and I couldn't see it. I mean, there's no way the governor could have known the Vulcan ships were already on their way. Communications were down. Matthew nodded, still judging his former friend's sincerity. So Kirk went all the way. With what he knew at the time, I figure Kodos did the right thing. It was a tough situation. It needed a tough solution. Matthew chewed the inside of his cheek. So you're okay with everything? Kirk forced himself to look apologetic. Are you okay with me? I almost got you shot up by those Starfleet goons. Matthew shot a glance at Sam. He's your brother. You buying any of this? Kirk kept his face from betraying his concern. Could he count on Sam? Would his brother know enough to play along? Sam shrugged. He doesn't talk about Tarsus 4 all that much, but when he does, yeah, he knows he screwed up. He keeps saying he wishes he'd gone off with his friends there instead of being shipped back home. You finally came to your senses, huh? Matthew asked. Kirk chose the strategy. I've got my own thing going now, he said with mock bravado. Big deal. You're stealing Starfleet cars. Matthew stopped and put a hand to his ear and turned away as if listening to something he didn't want to share. Kirk guessed he had a privacy earpiece like the one Mallory had worn. We call them earbuds today. Mindful of the 3 rifles trained on him, Kirk risked letting his gaze wander. He noted a wall of angled windows that overlooked the main cargo deck. A metal staircase led up to the door beyond them. The lights behind the windows were out, so Kirk could only see distorted reflections of the deck and their dark surfaces. But there was someone up there watching. He knew it. Matthew turned back to him, no longer listening to unheard voices. I hear you need to break into a Starfleet computer system. Kirk relaxed. Someone above Matthew had accepted his cover story. He could move to the next stage of his plan. Sam says you have an in. Matthew gave him a skeptical once-over. It's going to cost. Sam also says you could use more Starfleet cars, Kirk offered. I can give you the plans for my override. Just give us the override. Kirk knew Mallory would be holding on to the only one he had, so he continued his bluff. My first one had a few problems. I'll make you a new one. It'll work better. Matthew put a hand to his earpiece again. How long? A day to get the parts, a day to build it. Matthew listened, then nodded. We don't have the time for that. Kirk hadn't expected his offer to be refused, suppressed a flash of panic. Come on, 2 days? Then you can lift all the Starfleet cars you want. There's something else you can do for us. Like what? There's a guy at Starfleet we think you know. Eugene Mallory? Kirk kept his face blank. So? We're interested in one of his investigations. Which one? Matthew ignored his question. We need an inside guy we can trust. Kirk glanced at Sam, seeking insight, but his brother looked just as confused as Kirk felt. If I go anywhere near Starfleet, Kirk said slowly, they'll put me in custody. That's perfect, Matthew said. We know all about Alyssa and her honor board hearing. We know why you want access to the Academy's computers. Kirk looked back at Sam in surprise. How much had he revealed and why? Matthew sneered at Sam. Forget him. It's not as if we need your brother to tell us what's going on at the Academy. He studied Kirk as he made his proposition. What we want from you are the details of the dilithium theft investigation. That's when Kirk understood exactly what was going on here. Matthew's gang had stolen the dilithium. If I show up on Mallory's doorstep, Kirk said, wishing he could punch Matthew's teeth down his throat, they'll put me in detention. What could I do in there? You'll still see Mallory, and he'll talk to you. Then in 3 days, you'll have your hearing. They'll probably find you guilty of something. You'll appeal, get released, and you'll come back here and tell us everything he said. Matthew stopped again, hand to his earpiece. In exchange, we'll arrange unlimited access to the Academy's computers for, say, an hour. What if they lock me up and send me to a penal colony? Matthew seemed amused by the possibility. That's one way to get your brother off the hook, but that's not the way Starfleet works. Kirk was backed into a corner. The only thing to do was to turn himself in, tell Mallory everything, and lead Starfleet back here for the dilithium. Alyssa would be cleared, and he'd have the satisfaction of seeing at least one of Kodos's enforcers face justice. He nodded. Okay, an hour will do it. Sam can drive me over to Starfleet headquarters, and I'll turn myself in right now. Oh, that reminds me, Matthew said casually. I forgot to mention the details. He swung some kind of alien hand weapon up from a holster and shot Sam with an energy beam. Sam! Kirk was thrown back against the car with a rifle butt rammed in his stomach. He doubled over, dropped to his knees, gasping for air as Matthew grabbed his hair, forced his head back, stared down at him. Your brother's only stunned this time, but we don't want you to have any smart ideas, so we're tucking him away in a safe place until you come back with what we need to know. And if you don't deliver, Matthew held up the disruptor, this has 5 settings past stun, and the top one won't even leave ashes behind. Your choice, Jimmy. He held the weapons emitter to Kirk's forehead. You gonna do the right thing? Chapter 27. Spock had finally achieved the second foundation of inner breath when he heard the holding cell's force field power down and the security bars slide open. He opened one eye in time to see a red-shirted security guard in the doorway remove a pair of inductance cuffs from Jim Kirk. Spock didn't even pretend to try to resume his meditative state. With Kirk about to become his cellmate again, what was the point? He doubted even a Kolinar master could. Hey, Stretch, what's new? Thud. Kirk was sprawled on the fold-down bench, and once again Spock was almost pitched onto the floor. Spock sat up, feet flat on the floor, shoulders square, stared straight ahead. I've been taken back into custody because of your manipulation of the tracking modules. Kirk leaned forward, waved his hand in front of Spock's eyes to get his attention. Excuse me, you're saying it's my fault? I did not deactivate mine. Yeah, but you got out of it, right? That's what Mallory told me. Spock ignored Kirk with practiced Vulcan indifference. Kirk snickered. I bet you thought those things only sent off alarms when they were broken. You didn't know just taking them off your wrist would register. The human smirk was insufferable, but that was precisely what Spock had assumed, incorrectly as it turned out. He composed his riposte calmly. If there was no way to remove the module without forcing it apart, then for what logical reason would it have an alarm to register that it had been removed without being forced apart? Maybe they worried you might gnaw off your own hand. Get out of it that way, Kirk shrugged. But you can always grow a new one, right? It was difficult to disregard the human's deeply flawed reasoning and ignorance, but Spock did his best. I used a transporter. Ah, very nice, Kirk said, with what seemed to be real admiration. Why? Spock thought. The human's next words were just as puzzling. I just got beamed for the first time, Kirk said as he leaned nonchalantly back against the wall. Thought I was going to heave. Spock looked at him blankly. Regurgitate. Throw up. Vomit. Spock cut him off abruptly. I am familiar with most of those terms. He was beginning to feel as if he might be sick himself. What do Vulcans call it? Spock found it hard to believe he was engaged in such dialogue. Are you not concerned about the situation we are facing? Of course I am. Why do you think I turned myself in? Spock raised both eyebrows and just as quickly lowered them. For some reason, he had made the human smile. But Kirk took his unspoken question seriously. It was a logical thing to do. What were the odds of someone like me evading Starfleet? How'd you get here? Spock considered the doorway again, the bars once more in place, the force field emitters glowing. I was taken into custody by the protectors. While walking, they brought me here. Kirk straightened up with apparent interest. You were just walking. Why'd you take your module off? Spock countered with a question of his own. It was an old tactic, childish perhaps, but effective. Why did you remove yours? So they wouldn't know where I was. My reason was the same. Okay, but you're a Vulcan. You people don't lie, cheat, steal, break the law. Where would you be walking that you wouldn't want anyone to know about it? Why did you not want Starfleet to know where you were? I'm trying to do a favor for a friend, and she'd probably get into a lot of trouble if Starfleet knew I was meeting her. You removed the module not to help yourself, but to help your friend. You got it, Kirk said, flopping back against the wall. Plus, I have to say, it was fun, outsmarting Starfleet technology. They're a bunch of losers, and I like reminding them of that. Spock was both fascinated and appalled. Did this young human know nothing about the history of the Starfleet? How it served the Federation's noblest goals, was a pillar of scientific advancement, interplanetary cultural understanding, and a responsible force for providing security to the Federation's borders? It would seem you are unaware of what is one of your species' greatest contributions to interstellar civilization, Spock said politely. Maybe Starfleet started out that way, Kirk replied. But I can tell you I've seen it up close and personal. Oh, they talk a good game, but when it comes to helping people who really need their help, they're just like everyone else, looking out for themselves, not others. Spock was not sure, but he thought he detected the human emotion of melancholia, one his own mother sometimes exhibited, and which, in his experience, could be corrected with reason. Your statement is not valid. In fact, you have contradicted it yourself. Really? Spock felt encouraged and pressed on. Not everyone looks out for themselves to the detriment of others. You yourself told me you knowingly risked punishment by removing your tracking module to help your friend. Kirk's lack of response suggested he had no counter-argument, so Spock continued with his line of reasoning. If you are capable of such altruism, why can you not accept that an organization of like-minded individuals can do the same? Because they don't, Kirk said flatly. Not Starfleet. You are mistaken. You can talk all you want, Stretch, but all the logical arguments in the galaxy can't beat what I've seen with my own eyes. With that, Kirk closed his eyes. Whatever emotions were at work in the young human now, Spock was unable to sort them out. What was obvious was that Kirk was attempting to conceal what he truly felt. Like a Vulcan, Spock suddenly thought, surprised. That Amanda, his mother, did so was not remarkable because she was a student of Vulcan ways, but that other humans might do so for other alien reasons of their own. Well, Kirk asked, eyes open again. Do you have something to say, or are you just going to keep staring at me? Somewhat tardily, Spock remembered his cultural briefings. Humans regarded staring as a challenge. I apologize. He leaned back against the wall, adopting Kirk's posture to put him at ease. Another lesson from his xenophobia avoidance studies at the embassy. But you are still mistaken about Starfleet. You never give up, do you? Not when I'm right. A broad grin brightened Kirk's face. It was as if the sun had dispelled dark clouds. Spock felt dizzy just being near such a mercurial being. How about that, Stretch? You're just like me. Spock closed his eyes, horrified. Prisoners? Kirk repeated. I thought we were being held in detention as people of interest. Commander Bearden, a bored-looking Starfleet officer in a gold command shirt, checked a screen on his pad. He and a younger officer, Lieutenant Commander Norse, a plain-looking woman also in command gold, had just entered Kirk's and Spock's holding cell. They'd introduced themselves as the legal officers assigned to be the prisoners' Starfleet-appointed advocates. That's how you were originally detained, Bearden confirmed, sounding as disinterested as he looked. But when you reneged on your release agreement and removed the tracking modules, the charges went from non-judicial offenses to court-martial. Spock cleared his throat and spoke with utmost respect. May I ask how it is we are to be tried at court-martial without being members of Starfleet? To begin with, Lieutenant Commander Norse said, looking at each of them in turn, by stealing the staff car from a Starfleet facility, that is, the overflow parking lot outside the Academy, you committed an act of property violation that falls under Starfleet jurisdiction. You may well have been able to challenge Starfleet's authority in that matter with a civil hearing. But then, when you signed the release forms, presented when you received your tracking modules, you agreed to vacate your right to a civil hearing and submit to Starfleet's jurisdiction. We're minors. Norse, unsmiling, showed Kirk the forms on her pad. Your father co-signed your form. She tapped a control, and a form written in Vulcan notational script appeared, which she showed to Spock. And your duly appointed guardian co-signed your form. Bearden summarized her situation. You committed a crime against Starfleet property, you broke an agreement you made with Starfleet, and the result is that you are now subject to Starfleet rules and regulations. Quite logical, Spock said. Kirk glared at him. Are you nuts? He glared at the officers. I want a real lawyer. Norse referred to her pad. The next opportunity you'll have to argue civil jurisdiction will be if you're found guilty and appeal. If? Kirk repeated angrily. Spock followed up for both of them, more diplomatically. Is there a chance we will not be found guilty of the charges against us? Very unlikely, Lieutenant Commander said. Actually, there's little hope at all that you won't be found guilty of something. The whole system's rigged, Kirk complained. Someone's probably already denied our appeal before we've even made it. There is another option, Norse suggested. You are minors. Spock has no record of any kind on Earth, Vulcan, or any of the worlds he's lived on. You, well, so far there's nothing in your record that goes to a pattern of intentional criminal behavior. Spock looked at Kirk. Moving on, Kirk said. Upon review of the charges and your records, Bearden said, we strongly suggest you plead guilty to all offenses. As minors, first-time offenders with no indication of criminal intent underlying your actions, the Starfleet judge will give you both suspended sentences, most likely a year, in which you'll have to be on your best behavior, and then, when you each turn 20, the records will be sealed. Huh, Kirk said, considering. He turned to Spock. Works for me. What about you? There's only one problem with that solution, Spock said. I did not steal the staff car. Kirk stared at him in disgust. Norse looked almost apologetic. Mr. Spock, I understand your concern. I am bound to do what you direct me to do, and if it is your wish to have me defend you, I will do so to the best of my ability. But if you are then found guilty of the car theft, the judge will not contemplate suspending your sentence. You will serve time in a Starfleet penal colony. She paused for emphasis. And keep in mind that even if I present a successful defense of your role in the car theft, it's unlikely any defense will work to find you not guilty of destroying the tracking module and reneging on your signed agreement with Starfleet. Even if you avoid being convicted of the car theft, the judge will still insist on you serving time for the secondary offenses. What did I tell you? Kirk muttered to Spock. Starfleet's true colors. Bearden looked as if he were in a hurry to conclude the visit. It's up to you now, he said crisply. Plead guilty, and you're both on your way home tomorrow afternoon. Plead not guilty, you'll be held for trial, say another month in here, and then end up in a penal colony. Come on, Stretch, Kirk urged. You know what the logical choice is. Yes, Spock agreed. But in this case, the logical choice is also the wrong choice. Let me put it this way, Kirk said. You really want to have me for a cellmate for a year? And with that, for Spock, the correct and only solution became clear. Chapter 28. Guilty, Judge, all counts. Starfleet Judge Mahina Otago was a small, stern woman with admiral stripes on her dress shirt. She didn't seem surprised by the plea. Both defendants? Commander Bearden nodded at Kirk and Spock. Both teenagers stood with him at their table, flanked by Lieutenant Commander Norse. A yeoman in red operated a court recorder by the judge's bench of polished golden oak. The whole courtroom was paneled in golden oak. Kirk felt he was in a museum. Starfleet was that old and out of touch. But he tried hard not to look as uncooperative as he felt, even though the Starfleet flag behind the judge's bench was enough to knot his stomach. Instead, he ignored it long enough to say what he'd been told to say. "Yes, Judge." Spock repeated the same words beside him. Kirk couldn't believe how calm the Vulcan seemed to be. The judge entered some notes on her pad. "Very well." She looked up. "Anyone have anything to add before the court pronounces sentence?" Kirk balled his hands into fists, using all the self-control he possessed not to blurt out something that would only get him into more trouble. Beside him, Spock didn't move or change expression, which only annoyed Kirk more. He glanced back into the gallery and saw his father, jaw tight, face implacable. He also glimpsed the two Vulcan consular agents he'd seen outside the Garden of Venus the night he and Spock had been taken into custody. No one disturbed the oppressive silence in the court. Kirk felt Bearden nudge him, and he turned back to face the bench. "Judge," the commander said, "my colleague and I wish to remind you of our client's youth, their exemplary records, and their sincere regret for their immature prank." The judge looked at her pad. "It says here a Starfleet vehicle is still missing. That's more than a prank." "With respect, Judge, if you will note the custodial officer's report, my clients were charged with taking the car from Starfleet property, but not with its actual loss, which occurred after my clients had abandoned it." "Hair-splitting, but duly noted," the judge wrote again on her pad. Kirk felt his chest tighten, as if her deliberate slowness was actually suffocating him. Yet he knew he was powerless to bring this ordeal to a faster end. "Anyone else?" the judge asked perfunctorily. After a few moments, she continued, "This isn't the kind of case I usually see. I think one of the reasons for that is because of the high regard people have for Starfleet." Kirk dug his fingernails into his palms. She was going to give them a lecture before she passed sentence. He wasn't sure he could last through it. "And so I have to ask myself," the judge continued, "why it is that you two boys don't share that same regard, why you thought that taking a Starfleet vehicle was a good idea, and why you thought that you could enter into a legal agreement with Starfleet and then ignore it." Kirk gave Bearden a quick look. Was the judge expecting him to say something? Bearden shook his head once, then nodded to get Kirk to pay respectful attention to the judge again. "Because," the judge said, "those actions aren't youthful indiscretions, and at your ages, I'm not convinced that writing these incidents off as such will be what's best for you. If you have such disdain and indifference for authority today, who knows what you'll be capable of a few years from now?" As the judge droned on, Kirk began to feel his anxiety diminish. He knew exactly what she was doing now. He'd had his share of lectures from self-righteous authority figures. The judge was amplifying her threats, so he and Spock would be pathetically grateful when she announced that their punishment would be less severe than it could have been. The old hammer and feather, Kirk thought scornfully. "But it would be wrong of me to simply send you to a penal colony." Kirk was impressed. The judge was really laying it on. "I don't think simple punishment as such is in your best interests, or in Starfleet's. What I believe is in your best interests, and Starfleet's, is for the two of you to learn the value of respecting authority." Kirk adopted an expression of deep contrition, letting the judge know how seriously he took this, and how right she was. He waited, impatient, for whatever petty atonement she required of him, and the value of Starfleet itself. The judge lifted her wooden gavel. "Therefore, I am willing to let you both take the first step in what I hope will be your new path toward adult responsibility by offering you each a choice of sentence. Kirk blinked. Sentence? James Kirk, the judge said formally. And, she appeared to check Spock's first name on the pad, thought better of trying it, to say it. Mr. Spock, it is the order of this court-martial that you serve a sentence of 2 years in service to Starfleet, either as prisoners at the Starfleet penal colony in New Zealand or as enlisted personnel in Starfleet itself. What the? Kirk couldn't complete what he was about to say because Commander Bearden clamped a hand over his mouth. I'll give you a day to reflect on your decisions. We'll reconvene here at 1100 hours tomorrow morning. The judge lightly tapped the gavel on its stand. This court-martial stands adjourned. Admiral Otago entered her office, closed the heavy wooden door behind her, and shook her head in disgust. That was a travesty. Her visitor didn't contradict her assessment. How could he? I agree, Mallory said. Otago dropped her pad on her desk, letting the sharp smack it made reflect the frustration she felt. Then why force me to do that, Eugene? They are just kids. So one of them's a bit of a hellraiser. Show me any Starfleet brat who isn't. But a Vulcan? Found guilty? I'm going to be up before a review panel so fast I'll be my own warp engine. Mallory laughed. I'll handle the review panel. Otago regarded him sourly. 6 admirals and you'll handle them. I told you this was big. And this, well, let's call it what it is, an illegal manipulation of Starfleet's Uniform Code of Justice has been signed off on by your Oversight Committee. Mallory got up from the official visitor's chair, an antique wingback Otago had recovered from an exuberant tropical print, not the usual sedate choice for a Starfleet judge's office. It's not illegal, Mahina. There's nothing in the UCJ that prevents us from using deception to penetrate a criminal conspiracy. Except that those 2 civilians aren't part of the conspiracy, and they aren't even part of Starfleet. They're innocent bystanders. That's what makes them perfect for this. Perfect spies, you mean? Otago smoothed her shimmering jacket to compose herself. Because, of course, they don't know they're spies, right? Mallory had worked with the judge long enough to understand the dilemma she faced. I told you this morning, they're in no danger. My department would not put innocent civilians in harm's way. My Oversight Committee wouldn't allow it, and neither would I. Otago sat behind her desk. She reached down and pulled off her regulation black boots, inspecting her swollen ankles with a sigh. So how does this end? It ends well. Details, please. Tomorrow morning, those 2 will be back in your courtroom, and they will choose to enlist in Starfleet. Right, Otago exclaimed in disbelief. No Vulcan has ever joined Starfleet as an enlisted recruit, and I guarantee you their ambassador will raise hell in the Federation Council before one of theirs is forced into a decision like that. The comm lines will already be burning up. Spock is most certainly not going to be here tomorrow morning. If that happens, it happens. I'm prepared to lose one. Which leaves you with Kirk? He's already involved with what's going on. He's the one I really want. Yet from his record, it appears this Kirk kid has such animosity towards Starfleet that if I gave him the choice, he'd rather serve 10 years in an Andorian ice prison than 1 year in the service. Look into his earlier records. If anyone was born to be in Starfleet, this one was. He's just forgotten, that's all. How do you forget something like that? Mallory said nothing. Otago wasn't happy, but she understood. The silent treatment. That means we're talking something classified. Mallory remained mute. Otago rolled her eyes. Something so classified you can't even tell me it's classified. She massaged her tired feet. If it's that critical, how do you know they're not in danger? Mallory found his voice again. We've had their biosignatures under constant satellite surveillance from the moment they were released from custody. That doesn't strike you as a violation of their civil rights? As civilians, perhaps, but as witnesses under protective custody, completely legal. Did your witnesses consent to be followed by an all-seeing eye in the sky? Mallory pointed to her pad. It's in the case file. They and their guardians signed off on Starfleet surveillance as a condition of release. That was for the tracking modules. Yeah, we might have neglected to be that specific in the forms. They just include boilerplate descriptions of generic surveillance methods. Otago paged through the case file on her pad, found the forms, scanned them. You really know how to cover your backside, don't you? Everything's been done by the book. Otago tapped her pad off, as if she were wielding her gavel. Well, all I can say is good luck to you and your Machiavellian schemes, because I don't think those two boys have read that particular book, and I guarantee you this isn't going to work out the way you planned. Mallory held out his hand with a challenging smile. Dinner on the shores of Lake Armstrong? You know I hate the moon. But she took his hand, taking the bet. Then her desk screen chimed. It was her yeoman. The legal attaché from the Vulcan embassy was calling. So it begins, Otago said. Do you take this, or do I? But Mallory was already on his way out the door.